What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new on this channel, thank you so much for joining us today, and if you're coming back, thank you for clicking on this video. So wow, I'm looking at my YouTube studio stats right now, and we are sitting at 722 subscribers. Guys, can you believe it? So yeah, man, wow, it's amazing. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to my channel and for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. And for just your comments, your DMs. I love to see your DMs, and I have replied to every single one of your guys' DMs. I make it a point to like respond to you guys, because engagement is very important to me, and it's very important for my channel. So yeah, thank you so much. And to all my new subscribers, welcome to the family. I am Ntwanie Ngomane, and I'm bringing you guys all the good stuff on my CA journey. So I hope you guys get inspired by this video. And yeah, man, so today, sorry, my brothers are playing outside, so it's quite noisy. I think you guys can pick up on the noise as well. Please just excuse that. Yeah. So anyway, today we're talking about studying, right? And I've done a video on studying before, which I'm gonna leave up here for you guys to go watch. But I think today I just want to tackle how to study the theoretical modules differently from the practical modules, because you will agree with me, these are very two different type of exams that you write, and I think we all need like a way to tackle them, and it's not as easy as we think it may be. So I don't know if you're struggling to answer your theoretical questions, or you're losing marks and you don't understand why or how you're losing marks. Maybe this is a video for you. If you're good on your theoretical and you're good on your practical modules, maybe this video will not be very useful. But if you're somebody like me who struggled through it and who just wants to see improvement and who wants to figure out how to do it, then yeah, stick around. So without any further ado, let's get on to this video. So I jotted down some things, right, that I just want to discuss. So let's first start with theory. And in accounting as a whole, there are two cases in which you could be writing a theoretical question, right? Mostly. So that could either be in accounting, where accounting has that practical part of it, but it also has theoretical questions where they ask you like, does this meet the definition of an asset, for example, or they ask you the fair value measurement and stuff, borrowing costs, stuff like that. So that's your theoretical part of the module. But you also have auditing, right? Auditing is very theoretical. I think, I don't know, other than calculating materiality, I cannot at this moment think of any other calculation you do in auditing. And honestly, calculating materiality should not even take up to 5 marks. So yeah, auditing and the other theoretical part of accounting is like the two main modules. I think tax also has that theoretical element to it. So let's start with these theoretical modules, and let me start with the accounting portion of it, because it's quite different to the auditing and the tax, right? So with the accounting theory, for me, what I've seen works is that you need to read and understand what the IFRS says, right? So yes, I know your exam is going to be open book. You're going to be having the IFRS with you, and you will be able to copy and paste the theory onto your script, but it's not always practicable, because if you've read through the IFRS, you know how long those paragraphs are. So it's not always practicable that you will literally copy and paste the standard, but also it helps with time management when you know what the standard says, or you know what the theory says, right? So what has worked for me in my accounting is that I would read up the theory. So for instance, let's say I am reading the conceptual framework and I'm looking at the definition of an asset, and yeah, I read for understanding, right? So if it says an asset is controlled by the entity as a result of past events, outflow of economic benefits, those keywords. Like, you need to pick up on the keywords, and you need to not just read them, but you need to understand what we mean by control, right? So you need to go further into the explanations and see what constitutes control. Because just because you have this thing sitting in your house and it's housed there and it's staying there doesn't mean you actually control it. So you need to go and find out and dig deeper into the definition of the word control, and then that's where your deep understanding will come from. So when you've now understood the theory, right, you need to highlight in your standard the keywords. Guys, it is absolutely useless to go and highlight the whole paragraph, because on the day of the exam every paragraph in your standard is highlighted and you don't know to tell what's important and what's not important, right? So you need to do that. And then another thing, there are two ways in which you can answer a theory question, depending on how the question or the required is phrased. In accounting, mostly what happens is you would write down your theory and then you would write down your application, right? So if we talk about an asset, which is a resource controlled by an entity as a result of past event, through which you will get economic benefits or flow to the company, you'd write down those requirements and then you will apply specifically to the scenario that you're given, right? That's one way to answer it. And remember, for a theory question in accounting, the theory carries a mark. The theory carries a half mark, if I'm not mistaken. I think it can differ with universities, but from where I come from, the theory in the IFRS carried a half mark. So like the resource controlled will be half, past events is half, economic benefits will be half marks. So that's like 1.5 marks, right? And then your application is what will now come with marks depending on how deep the scenario that you're given is. So that's one way in which you can apply it. The second way in which you can apply a theory is you go right into application without necessarily quoting or writing down the exact word from the standard, but using the same principles in your application. So basically you would say, for instance, this vehicle is a resource controlled because it is within the use of the company. They control the amount of use, they control where it goes, they, those type of factors you can just literally apply by taking into account and bringing back into the theory, but not necessarily having to write down the requirements. I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying, but yeah, those are two ways in which you can answer the theory. And the second way, the second way in which you can answer, where you just apply, is also in most cases applicable to auditing as well. With auditing, you do not have to go down and write the whole ISAs, right? You just literally, if they ask you about the risk of misstatement, you just go into your scenario, into your processes, and see where the risk of misstatement could be. You don't go down and just write the whole ISA. I think it's 315 or something like that. So yeah, that's how the second way in answering can work. But remember, with theoretical questions, you need to be guided by the number of marks, guys. Before anything in any question paper, you need to see the allocated marks. You cannot answer a theory question with 5 marks for a whole page, especially in an accounting program, like, because it's half marks. Like, it's a waste of time. The amount of content that you put on that page should at least equate to the marks that are allocated for that question. So it's something that you develop over time and over practice, that if this amount of marks is allocated for this specific question, this should be the length of my answer, or this should be the depth of my answer. It's something you develop as you practice. And that brings me to my next point, that theoretical questions needs you to practice. You need to constantly practice, or at least constantly read the theory. But also, you also need to look at past papers and see how your lecturer likes their theory questions to be answered, because quite honestly it is very different per lecturer. One lecturer may tell you, I want you to write me down the theory and then apply it for me. One lecturer will say, I don't need to see the theory on the paper, I have the theory on my efforts, I want to see if you can apply the theory. So you need to know the testing style of your lecturer, the testing style of your university, and you need to follow that. Because I've had friends who moved from one university where they had a different testing style with theory to another university which is also different, but now in this university that they moved to, they were now applying the principles from the first university, and that clashed. They didn't get all the marks because that's not how they do it there. So you guys need to learn how your lecturer wants it. You need to learn how your institution wants their students to answer their papers, and that is simply shown in their past papers and how they've answered in the memos and stuff like that. So also your tutorials helps you clarify these things as you attend, right? So that's your theory part. I hope that helps, somehow. And then just when we're still on the theory, let me touch a bit on tax, right? Tax is quite tricky, and tax is quite different from accounting. It's also different from auditing. So sometimes in tax they want you to list the requirements and then apply, but sometimes they want you to just apply to the scenario. Like I said, it's very different. It also depends on the lecturer and what the lecturer wants, but it also depends on your understanding of the act, right, of the Income Tax Act. So sometimes you don't need to write the theory, especially if it's like very long. You don't need to write it down as long as you can apply it clearly. Sometimes it also helps to write the section numbers, guys. For tax, it really does help, because you may be discussing something, but if you can't show the marker that you know what you're talking about and this is in the act in this section, sometimes they can mark you negatively or mark you wrong because you are not, it seems like you're trying to second guess the Income Tax Act. You're not really sure if it's there or not. So putting in your reference, putting in your Income Tax Act sections and referencing there, it really does help. But also practice a lot with past question papers. I think for me, when I was still a student, is for tax, I used to do a lot of tats. I used to do a lot of homework. I used to practice a lot with past papers, and that's how I got to understand how UP wants questions to be answered, and so I tailored my answers to fit the way in which they want things to be answered. And that really helps, because you don't lose unnecessarily marks because just because you didn't understand how the lecturer wants this to be done. So I hope that helps with your theory. It's also quite important to study the theory, to understand it, to understand what it's saying. Go beyond the words used in the efforts. Like the efforts uses like big English, okay? Like they use serious words. So if you don't understand, they have explanation guides, guys. They have basis of conclusions. Like when I was still in varsity, I never even used to open my basis of conclusions books. Like I just opened the normal FRSs and the normal IAS, but I would never go to the basis of conclusion. But now at work, the most thing that we use is the basis of conclusion and the explanations paragraphs, which I never looked at as a student. I don't know why, but I think now looking back, I'm like, had I gone to the basis of conclusions and the explanation standards, I would have actually understood this better than I did by going to the main standard. So maybe that's a tip for you that you might want to use. So let's move on to the practical, right? So the practical, again, the practical is two main modules, which is your accounting practical, where you now do your calculations. You now calculate your depreciation. You've now determined that this thing is an asset, but now you need to calculate the depreciation. You now need to account for borrowing costs if you're capitalizing borrowing costs. Excuse me guys for the lighting, but it's not very perfect today. So yeah, that's where your accounting practical comes in. And then another module that has a lot of practical in accounting is the financial management model, where they bring in your standard costing, they bring in your ABCs, they bring in your mergers and your acquisition, your valuations and stuff like that. Interesting stuff in practice, by the way. But for your practical modules, right, point number one for me, what worked big time, is have two books. So like have those A4 hardcover books, right? Have two of those for every module that you have. So if you're having 4 major modules, your accounting, your auditing, tax, and FM, you're gonna have 8 of those, right? Because you're having 2 per module. On one, I want you to start taking notes. Keep this notebook constant to that module. If today you're attending a class on auditing, no, actually let me give an example with practical module. If today you're attending on a class on financial management, right, I want you to take the financial management notebook. If you're attending a class on accounting, I want you to take your accounting notebook, right? Stop that whole thing of having one book and then writing notes for all 4 modules. That thing is confusing. At the end of the year, you don't know where you wrote your fair value measurement notes. You don't know where you kept your consolidation notes. You don't know where you kept your risk of misstatement notes. Like, it's a mess in one book. So just have one book for each module that will serve as a notebook, and that you will carry around with you whenever you want to study that module or whenever you're attending a class for that module. So that's the first book. The second book that would be advisable for you to have is a practice book, right? A practice book is where you attempt all your questions for that specific module. So if you're attempting or practicing a question on financial management, I want you to have one specific A4 hardcover book for financial management, in which you're gonna keep track of all the questions you have done from the beginning of the year until the last day of your academic year, or the day before your exam or whatever like that. So that helps you because you're gonna have this one book, right? So this one book is gonna have the questions you've ever practiced on financial management from January until November. Then how does this help you? I mean, I could do it anywhere on any paper, but the thing is, if you do it on different papers, you could lose all of that papers. And what it means at the end of the year is you might have to go back and redo the question that you did in February, just because you don't remember what lesson you learned from that question. So if you keep one book, right, if you know in this book I'm going to do financial management, you know that in February when we did ABC, I did this question and this question and this question, and these questions are still here. So I can go back where I've marked and see why I got this wrong, This is a technique that helped me pass CTA very well, actually. It's a technique that helped me pass my CTA, even though it was in my second attempt. After discovering this technique, guys, I never looked back. Like, I never had that nagging feeling that you haven't done all the questions, you haven't practiced enough questions, you haven't, because I had proof. I could go back to my practice book and open from page 1 and tell you it was the 25th of January, I did this question, this is what I learned. Even if at the end of the year, right, when now you're writing your exam and you think, oh my god, I don't have time, you just need to get your practice book, open it from the first page. The only thing that you may need to do is maybe reread the question from your question book, just to get an understanding of what was happening. And then when you go to your practice book, you're like, oh, I did this, okay, I got this wrong, why did I get this wrong? It's already in here. You don't need to waste time and do under exam conditions and practice a whole 25-mark question, because at the end of the year in CTA, honestly, you don't have time. So if you can do this one thing for yourself, guys, and just have one book where you will practice all your tags, you will practice all your homework questions, you will practice all your what do they call it, at UP they used to give us question banks, so you'd practice all your question bank questions in this one book. At the end of the year, all you need to do is take your book and sit down and page through. Oh, okay, I didn't get this what is this valuation, because here I actually need to deduct depreciation, because depreciation is a non-cash item. You know, like, it's already in here. You don't need to like panic and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't finish all the questions in the question book. What if I just do this one long 150 mark question? Like, it just saves you the stress, honestly. So that's how I do my practical questions. And that's how, the thing with practical questions is you need to focus more on the practice, and that's why it's a practical. You learn more when you do than when you read, and this is very true for 90% of the things in life. You learn when you do, so it's easier to just do the questions at a nice slow pace during the year, that by the time the year ends and by the time you need to write your exam, you're all good to go. So another last thing on practical questions is that please do not anticipate the required. And I know for a lot of us this is a thing, like, you know, once you get to that point in your accounting studies where you first receive the scenario before you receive the required, like, don't anticipate what the required could say. Like, don't be like, oh, okay, they're giving me associates, so maybe they want me to equity account. They're giving me subsidiaries, maybe they want me to consolidate. Do not anticipate what the required could say, because the risk with that is, even though you have the required and you've read the required, the fact that you have previously formed requireds in your mind, it deviates you from what the actual required wants to now you answering what you think the required wants. And that's very dangerous, because you can end up doing a whole 25 mark question on equity accounting when they just wanted two amounts, and you could have gotten them without even doing that whole equity accounting structure, you know. So I don't know if this helps, guys, but these are my tips. Tell me if you need more tips on studying. If you need more tips maybe on a specific module, I could definitely do a video on a specific module. I still remember that I said I will do a video on financial management and how to tackle it. It's been a problem for me. I know it's a problem for you. I know it's going to be a problem for someone else one day. But what we need to remember is there are people who have paused and there are people who have conquered that module. So we can definitely get them on the channel and they can explain to us how to tackle it as well. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Please do let me know if there's anything I might have missed, if there's anything more that you want to see regarding studying, if you need study tips, if you need exam tips, you know, stuff like that. But otherwise, I hope you guys like this video. Please do give it a massive thumbs up if you did, and like it, and comment down below and let me know how you found this content. Let me know if it's easier for you to do theory and practical, if you're good, any other tips that you may have for others to see. Otherwise, please do hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.